When a kidnapper pointed a gun at my sister's head, my fiancé was so worried sick that he shoved me forward. "Can we switch hostages? I'm sorry," he blurted. Then he turned to me, voice tight. "Glinda, your sister's carrying my baby." 6 months later, I escaped from the kidnapper and returned home with a baby bump. Leland completely lost it. "Whose baby are you carrying?" I thought I knew Leland so well. After all, we were childhood sweethearts. Ever since we were kids, he promised he would marry me when we grew up. I never imagined that one day he'd tell me my 19-year-old half-sister Tamia was pregnant with his child. And worse, he'd offer me up in her place. I stared at him like a complete idiot. "You're joking, right?" I blurted. Leland clenched his jaw, didn't say a word. The kidnapper chuckled, flicking his cigarette. "Even I can tell he's not." He exhaled a long stream of smoke, then pointed at Leland. "So? Who's the hostage?" Leland turned away, refusing to meet my eyes. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. Was this really the same boy I grew up with? The same Leland who used to hold my hand and tell me he'd love me forever? Now he wouldn't even look at me. Instead, his gaze was locked onto Tamia, concern deep in his eyes, urging her to stay calm, urging her to protect their baby. Then, at last, he turned to me. "Glinda, I'll bring you home. Just hold on a little longer." Then to the kidnapper. "Keep her as the hostage. Let me take Tamia back." His voice was firm, steady. "But don't expect a dime from me." Tears welled up in my eyes as I stared at him, at the face I once loved. I used to be mesmerized by his looks, his charm, but now all I felt was despair. I sniffled, trying to hold back my tears. "I'll be the hostage," I said, my voice hollow. Leland finally looked at me. There was nothing in his eyes, no hesitation, no regret, no love. That was the moment I knew. He didn't care about me anymore. All his love belonged to Tamia now. I let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling. "But tell me," I whispered, "when did it start?" I closed my eyes, searching my memories. Was it that time I had an accident and called you? You said you were in a meeting, but you sounded out of breath. Or maybe on my birthday, when I saw those red marks on your neck. You laughed and said they were mosquito bites, but you wouldn't let me look too closely. Or a tear slipped down my cheek. This year, on the anniversary of my mother's death, you ignored my calls for 12 hours straight. I should have known. I should have seen it. But I didn't, because he was my childhood sweetheart. Because I loved him with all my heart, and I never thought he'd betray me, not with Tamia. Tamia, my father's illegitimate daughter. Tamia, the reason my mother died with a broken heart. When my mother passed, Tamia and her mother, Sheila, moved into our house. And from that moment on, it was like I didn't exist. My father showered Tamia with love, with gifts, with everything. He gave her the best jewelry, the most expensive dresses. He gave her the best house in town, and he treated her like a princess. While I was just the daughter of the woman he used to love. And now it seemed Leland had made his choice too. Perhaps noticing I wasn't happy about it, my father tried to console me. "Glinda, please don't be angry. I wasn't there for Tamia when she grew up. But you have me all the time. I just want to make up for my past mistakes." I couldn't help but sneer to myself. He seemed to have forgotten the fact that Tamia was his illegitimate child, and it was normal for her to have grown up without a father. To make amends, my father donated money to a university to ensure Tamia's enrollment. He even transferred the company's shares to her. Sheila even took over my mother's old rooms, wore her jewelry, and socialized with her former friends. Even the household servants began treating me differently, as if I were no longer a part of the family. Every time I told Leland about it, he would hold me in his arms, assuring me, "Don't be afraid. I'll marry you. Then all these people will know how important you are," including Sheila and Tamia. I truly believed we would be together forever. But things took a turn when Tamia started playing the pity card in front of him. When Leland was around, she often fainted. Her face would be red and sweaty, but she would bite her lips and act tough. Too often, Tamia pointed at the designer clothes I was wearing and asked Leland about the brands. Whenever she asked him that, she would act like a pitiful little rabbit. She would tell him that she had a hard life when she was young, so she knew nothing about designer clothes. Done on top of that, I often caught her exposing the scratches on her arms, but then hurriedly covering them up like she didn't mean to show them. Leland couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked her how she got those scratches. She cried in his arms, telling him how kids bullied her for having no father, and that she would feel better after hurting herself. At first, Leland got stiff all over, his hand hanging in the air. But then he patted her back gently, soothing her with a soft tone. As I snapped out of my memories, I saw the two of them walking away from me. They looked certain that the kidnapper would never let me go, and I would be out of their sights for good. I was heartbroken, watching Leland's back walking toward the door. "Does Tamia matter more than me to you?" I asked. If he didn't answer, he just wrapped his arm around Tamia's waist and quickened his pace, and then he disappeared from my sight. Devastated, I turned to look at the kidnapper. "Where are you taking me?" He lit a cigarette with a smile. "You don't get to ask me questions. You're the hostage, remember?" When he raised his head and looked at me, I caught a glimpse of his eyes, which had been hidden under the baseball cap before. His deep eyes were pure cold, and I thought he would kill me on the spot. But to my surprise, I managed to survive for over 6 months in his hands before the police found my location and rescued me. Before he was arrested, the kidnapper laughed out loud and looked at me, his eyes full of mixed emotions. After I got home, I was greeted by Tamia, Sheila, my dad, and Leland. Tamia's baby bump was quite noticeable by now, while Leland kept staring at me silently with a meaningful gaze. The moment I stepped into the house, he walked up to me. "Glinda!" Tamia wiped away her tears and stuttered. We were so worried about you. We hardly ate the last few months." None of them looked thinner than before, but Leland indeed looked haggard, that he gently patted my shoulder and asked in a hoarse voice, "How have you been? Are you hurt?" I calmly took a step back and dodged his hand. "Don't touch me!" His eyes widened slightly. "Glinda, I know you blame me, but I hired detectives and investigators to look for you everywhere as soon as I came back." He paused a moment before adding, "I thought you would be free as long as I gave the kidnapper the ransom and hired people to look for you, but I didn't know you would be captive for so long. I've been suffering every day for the past 6 months. Glinda, I hate myself." I fought to hold back my laughter. "He's so ridiculous. You hate yourself? Then tell me, do you hate yourself for sleeping with your fiancé's sister and getting caught? Or do you hate yourself for not wearing a condom?" He was stunned, probably because he had never seen the side of me before. "I know you hate me." I shook my head and walked past him, saying indifferently, "Get your head out of the clouds. I don't hate you anymore. Actually, I don't feel anything at all for you anymore. I want you to stay away from me because I'm pregnant." "What?" Leland asked in disbelief. "Glinda, you're kidding, right? You're telling me that just because you want to piss me off? How could you possibly get pregnant all on your own?" As soon as he finished speaking, Leland shut up. He finally realized he had done something terrible, leaving me with a dangerous man for over 6 months. "I'm not lying," I replied. "I'm pregnant with that man's child." His face darkened instantly. He paced back and forth anxiously. "Glinda, please tell me it's not true." It can't be." I sat on the sofa and looked at the antique porcelain plate on the coffee table. It was one of my mom's collections. He told me it would be my wedding gift, but now it has become a container for Tamia's favorite toffee. Why so surprised? You should have known the moment you turned around and abandoned me. Back then. Did you ever think about my feelings when you knocked up Tamia? Huh? With that, I poured the toffee on the plate into the trash can. Then I stood up from the sofa and went upstairs with the plate. Listen up. Don't ever lay your hands on my mom's stuff again. I was about to go upstairs when my dad finally came to his senses and shouted, "Stop right there! Who's the father of your child?" "Sheila," echoed Glinda. "It's just a plate. Why so serious about it? Put it down first and explain why you are pregnant." I stopped and turned around, explaining impatiently. "Of course, the man who took me hostage is the father. Who else could it be?" Then I pointed to Tamia. "She's carrying Leland's child, yet you all keep silent about it. Why make a fuss over my pregnancy?" She touched her belly. "Glinda, please, what's done is done. There's nothing I could do to change things." And when she stared at the plate in my hand, hatred was written all over her face, as if I had snatched something that belonged to her. And she added, "At least my child's father is a decent man. But your child's father—" Suddenly she stopped. "Keep going." I looked at Tamia and smiled. "What cat got your tongue? Just so you know, my child's father is the best man in the world." Next second, the sound of glass breaking echoed in the living room. Leland had knocked over the coffee table, and the cup shattered into pieces. His face was pale, and he looked at me incredulously. Did I end the past? I always said he was the best man in the world, that I had praised him since I was a child, but it was him who pushed me into hell. Now I had gotten out of hell, and I fell for another man, and Leland couldn't take it. Puzzled, I asked him, "Why are you looking at me like that, Leland? You're the reason it all went down like this. You know it." I went upstairs to my bedroom. The moment I opened the door, I thought I had gone to the wrong room. Everything in the room was red. The sheets, curtains, lampshades, and even the dressing table. That I would never choose red as a color for decorating. But now it was everywhere. I no longer felt like my own space. Mia must have taken over my room while I was away. She was the only one who loved red so much that I couldn't help but let that aside. Back then, Sheila took over my mom's room, right after she passed away. Later on, my dad helped Sheila renovate the bedroom, in the way she liked that at the site. The nanny, who had been taking care of me since I was a kid, commented that the bedroom didn't look as elegant as before. Not long after that, Sheila fired her. Like mother, like daughter. Now Tamia took over my room and made it her own. There was no room for me in this family anymore. Tamia followed me and said, "Glinda, I'm pregnant and need more sunlight. So I moved to your bedroom. Do you want me to move out?" And my dad uttered, "It's okay, Tamia. Glinda is your sister. She doesn't mind it." "Well, you can let her have your room." After closing the bedroom door, I told them firmly, "No, I don't want her room. I'll get morning sickness when I see something disgusting in Tamia's room." Then I turned around and went downstairs, adding, "I'm going to stay in the hotel." My father was stunned because it was the first time that he had ever heard me talking back like that to Diane. In the past, whenever they treated me like trash, I would just take it. Not daring to fight back to me, I choked up, playing the victim again and again and again. Tears welled up in her eyes as she mumbled, "Glinda, I told you. If you don't like it, I can move out." I frowned and stopped. "Okay, then give me back my room. I hate your room. Can't you see?" Hearing that, Tamia was so shocked that she even forgot to keep the show going on. Nearly rolling my eyes at her, I made a gesture to motion her to get it started. "Pack up your things and take them out of my room." "I'm waiting," I demanded. I used to have a good temper and never got angry with others, believing that it was how a well-educated and elegant lady should behave. However, Harold Adams, the man who had kidnapped me and kept me by his side, burst my bubbles of fantasy. He told me that I should keep my good temper to myself and lash it all out when someone bullied me, especially when it came to dealing with my family. That he stroked my hair and said, "Promise me that you will never let anyone bully you again, okay?" And I nodded at him. No, I was standing in the corridor with my arms folded, looking at Tamia's tearful eyes and listening to her sobs without saying a word. I wanted to see when she would start doing as I said. Unfortunately, before she could take action, my dad voiced his thoughts.